Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for our user group session on Live Maps V10 summary dashboards. There's a lot to cover on this topic, so we've decided to split the user group into two sessions. Part one today, and the second one will be on July 26th. I'm Andrea Easton, Customer Success Manager for North America, and I'll be joined by Chris Millay, our Support Manager today. Justin was hoping to join us, but he's caught between trains, so he might join us later. As usual, the session will be in two parts. Chris will present the summary dashboards, and then we'll open it up for any questions you may have. To raise your hand, press the hand button, and we can unmute you, or you can type your question in the chat. Back to you, Chris.
Okay, so this was actually titled, Summary Dashboards for Live Maps V10. However, we are actually going to break this up into two user groups. There's a lot of information to cover. We felt that it was probably best to kind of split this up into two so everyone gets an idea of the content that we're covering now, and then we have more to cover in about a month from now. So start off, I'll let you know that these are the widgets that we're going to cover for this round. Basically, the health state widget, performance graph, alert summary, alert listing, services, SLA, and then PowerShell. Just so you know, the next one we do, we'll try to cover the rest of the widgets and including the SQL widget. So I did purposely kind of divide PowerShell and SQL up into two different sessions, since I have a feeling that's probably where a lot of questions may come from. I'm going to go ahead and answer one question that I know is going to pop up. I'm going to just go ahead and answer it right now before we get going. As far as the V10 release, I'm hoping that by the time we actually get to the users group for part two of this, it'll actually be out. So we are expecting July release. There are a few things going on that may push that back just a little, but hopefully, as the way it stands now, we do expect it. I expect anyway a July release. Whether that happens or not is another story, but that's what I expect, and that's what I've been told. So we'll just kind of go from there. That's the knowledge I have, and now you know it too. So off to the lab. Actually, it's just off to the browser. So I do have a pre-release, obviously, of V10. So keep in mind that what you see, some things may be a little different on the actual release. Couple key things that I want to point out. The homepage itself is a summary dashboard now, so that allows you to customize the homepage to your liking of the things that you want to put up here instead of the things that we've always had up there. So now you have differences that you can take care of there. Which is good, because now it's, we've gotten the request that you guys wanted to customize it and kind of go from there. Second thing I want to tell you is all dealing with the menu here. Obviously, we're moving parts of V10 into more Angular, so there's still parts of the software that's still the old code, and parts of it that's now the new code. Your current summary dashboards will remain as is. We are not converting them, we're not touching them. Basically, if you notice, when I come down to summary dashboards, there's a reference to legacy dashboards. That's where those will remain. So you will basically be able to see them, go into them, have them. It gives you an opportunity to kind of take that. It doesn't get rid of them at all. Or anything like that. That will remain, so that any links that you have to them will still exist. But then create new ones based on some of the things you can do with the version 10 summary dashboards, and then transition over. So we felt that was the best kind of track to take, instead of trying to do a mass conversion and then having things break and then things of that nature. So creation. So let's start with creating a summary dashboard. It's pretty simple to start off with. All I have to do is click on Create Summary Dashboard. This is the summary dashboard in edit mode. The first thing I want you to notice is that we already started off with a title. So before, it used to be a blank entry in the title, and if you went through the process of adding different widgets, then all of a sudden went to save, sometimes you got the error message that you needed a title. Well, now we just go ahead and create one new dashboard, at least to begin with. It's up to you. You can come in here, change it out, add it what you want. Also, I know I've told some people back in the past that we were thinking about toying with adding the number of widgets. We've kind of decided to keep it at 12. So you see the number of widgets that you have currently. The big difference here is that instead of having a 4x3 kind of grid that you had before, really you can extend this as far down as you want. It is 6 across, so there are actually kind of 6 position points across the way, but that gives you a little bit more granularity as far as making the size of the widget. You'll see exactly how I can drag and drop and move the widgets around and resize them to your liking. So it's a lot more flexible on that end. So adding a widget, first place to do is add a widget. Down here at the bottom, the little red or blue plus sign gives you into adding your first widget. So we're going to cover health state first. So I want to click on health state, click next. Now, a couple key differences. I kind of want to tell you what our widgets are like and kind of the general flow for all of them. All of them will have kind of the same kind of tab system up at the top where I have general, I have views, and then I have data. Not all of them have these, so some of them, may only have general, but for the most part, this is generally what you're going to see throughout all of them. Before, you had to add a title to a widget. This time you don't. So if I don't want to add a title to it, I can leave it blank. Refresh interval. Each widget operates independently. So now you don't have to worry about the refresh of the entire page. If you have some widgets that take a little longer than others because of the items that they have to return, they can refresh at their own rate. Also, if there's data that may not change much, so you load it once and maybe you don't want it to refresh. So maybe I set it to like 999 seconds or something like that, or maybe you only want it to refresh every 5 minutes, or depending on what you're after, you can make those differences. Now, because of that, we've added this, make the last updated time visible, and that'll actually show up in the upper right-hand corner of the time that widget actually refreshed. Now, one of the big important things with this is our no results message. Used to be in the past that if you had like a certain widget that was pulling data, especially PowerShell or something like that, that returned no results, then basically you got the kind of ugly message that said no data available. Well, now you can customize and say, hey, I want it to look like this when the query comes back, or I have no results. Case in point, when I'm talking about a health state widget, and something I'll show you in the data section, you no longer have to say, give me all of one particular class. You can say, I want all of my Windows computers, but I only want to see the ones in a critical or a warning state. So if all of them are green, you don't necessarily have to just look at a bunch of green tiles. You can actually do what you want with those. So just kind of as an example, I was goofing off with this. Did this in my first session, just because I felt like being a little different. Not something I recommend in an actual dashboard because it might get a little annoying. I'm actually just going to add that right away. I have not configured this in any way, shape, form, or fashion other than the fact that I said, hey, if I don't have any results, give me this. Now, this is automatically 2. That's actually the size of the single widget, the minimum size you can have. Here, you'll notice that I can drag, drop, and move this and create this and make it any size I want, within reason, obviously. Time gives you the time of when it was last updated. So if I want to, I can actually go in and configure this or reconfigure this. Now, Views tab. This tells you what type of views are available. In this case, I want a heat map. I'm also going to check entity state. This is kind of nice for your end users in the fact that you can start off one type of view as a default, but then they can switch it on an individual basis of what they would like to see during that browser session. So the next time it reloads, it'll go back to the default, but they can change it back to the way that they want. So you're picking the default view. There are other options in here, like how many columns you would like. Do you want to show the path name, display name, things of that nature? Data. Okay, so V8 used to have to do, you had to pick your object type. So in that case, this is a class. So Windows Server. I want to come in here and grab my Windows Server class. So I'm going to leave that alone. You'll notice that my update, I update a preview so you can see exactly what you're going to get. I'm just going to go ahead and hit update so I can get rid of the stormtroopers giving me the okay. Anyway, if I want to, I can come back in here, edit this again. Back into data, you'll notice that I can scope this to a group if I want to. Same thing as before. Here's where things are a little bit different. So I have a class, but what if I want to look at all of the members of a group? So if I come into this and just click OK, I now have not necessarily a certain class, but I can actually show all the members of a group. I can combine these, so if I want to, I want all of the servers that are in this group, I could do that too. This happens to be one of our live map dashboards, and I'm actually showing you the health state of the sub dashboards in that one. But I can actually take this one step further. I can actually include all sub members. So not only am I looking at the group, but I'm looking at the sub members. Now this could get kind of long. So if you have some computers and some dashboards and even other objects that have a lot of sub members, this obviously can be a very long list. However, it's actually showing you the objects and then sub objects for that. Now I can take this one step further, obviously, and now say, look, I only want to see the ones that are in warning and an error message, and update this again. So now I actually have a very simplistic view. I can make this a little smaller because I don't need as much real estate to give me the information I'm truly after, which is the ones that are down. I don't necessarily always need to know the ones that are up. Something I actually didn't cover in my first session that I probably should have this morning, there's two other buttons on here. Obviously, one is to delete. The other one is to clone. So if I'm going to do this exact same thing over again, but maybe just select a different group, I could technically just clone this one. Do I want to clone it? Yes. It'll create a new widget right next to it, exactly the same. Now all I have to do is come in here, go into the data, change this around. Maybe I want this one to be Active Directory instead. So now I have it for Active Directory. So you can clone this thing as you go along and to add more widgets. So that is the health state. We renamed it. It used to be called heat map, but now it's called health state because it's a little bit different. I do want to come out of edit mode just briefly to show you one more thing on this. As I told you that we can to allow other types of views. This default view is the heat map, but I can turn around and change it. The end user can change it and move it to entity state. So if they want to see it more as a list kind of view, then you can have that. Come back into edit mode, add a new one. So the next one I'm going to cover is performance graph. This is where I feel that you're going to get a lot of people doing things, at least. Again, if I want to add a title or make the refresh interval, I can do that. Views, I have several different ones. So each widget is going to have the different types of views that it's available to that particular widget. Same thing with options. Each one will have its own selection of what you want to deal. The reason why columns are in here is because we do give this the ability to go to a heat map, and that is kind of nice in some ways, and I'll show you here in a moment. So big difference in between version 8 and version 10 used to be that you had to find and select the object class or the object type first, and then we would show you the metrics that were available underneath that one. Well, that's all and good, but sometimes there was metrics there that didn't have any data, or sometimes you didn't know, you knew about what the performance metric was, but you didn't know what class it was under. Now we're basically just kind of giving you one long list. So if I want, I can do percentage processor. Oops. You'll notice here I have my selection of my 2016 and my 2012 R2. So I can add those two in here. One of the other key differences that we're doing here is we're only trying to show you data that is there, only trying to show you the performance counters that are there that actually have data, at least from my understanding, within the time span. So I've selected 1 day, so it's looking back 1 day to see if there's data for any of the metrics there for 1 day. So try to reduce that the number of counters that you're seeing to really the ones that actually have data. Now, I can scope this to a group. I can select a unit if I want to. Obviously, I change this to a day. In this case, I'm not curious about minimum because I'm dealing with processor. So I want to know the highest, the maximum counter for that area. And I really want to sort this by highest, not necessarily lowest. Now you'll notice right away that I have several performance counters in here. It used to be that in version 8, the performance counter limited you to 6. That limit is no longer there. You can actually adjust the limit to what you would like to see. So if I only want to show the top 10, top 20, whatever, obviously you have to be careful of if you add too many in here, it can become a big bowl of spaghetti. But that's your option now, not ours. So I'm going to add this one in here. And because of how much it takes up, I'm actually going to stretch this out a bit so I have a little more room. You know, I now can see this through the day. I can see the counters that I have. Couple key points on this one that are really nice. So I'm going to take myself out of edit mode temporarily. So here's the legend of all of the ones that I have in here. Well, if I want to, I can actually turn around and turn off the different ones that are in here and only show certain ones. You can also do this quickly. So let's say this one here, this one that happens to go to my new Live Map server that I just put in place in this environment. If I want to, I can double click on that one. That will actually remove all of the other ones except for this one. And if I click on it again, it puts them all back. So we are trying to give you some leverage there to give you some flexibility to find the data that's there, other than just a big graph. Now, looking at the different types of views. So first one I'll go to is grid. So obviously it's just a grid information of all of the data. You can turn around and sort this, you know, if I want to. Actually, I should just click here. So that does allow you to sort the information. That's really helpful because over here, if I want to, I can also export the data to a CSV. So now you have an option to bring the information that you have in here out. Bar chart, same thing as before, except for now I have a little bit more information going across, more in a bar type of look to it. Same rules apply that if I double click on something, that server is actually offline. If I double click on a particular metric or server that I'm after, I can turn around and just see that one, and the other ones will turn off. Entity state. Entity state is a lot like looking at it from a top-end perspective, where I can see my processor count. Now, I am going to explain a little bit about the zeros. So, and it's something that's probably going to change before RTM. In version 8, what we would do is show you the last known value for a particular server or a particular metric. That metric may be an hour old. That metric may be 2 hours old. It could, depending on when it last received it, last saw the information directly in SCOM itself. There are cases where that's, yes, it's nice to know, but if the data is that stale, it's probably not always a good thing. Right now, the way this is working is the zeros are because there's no data within the last hour, or it may not be an hour. I'm sorry if I don't have that one particular, but I think they are going to change this a little bit and show the last data just like they did before, but maybe color code if it's stale or ranging in a certain time frame before the last data was seen, or something like that. So this will probably change a little bit before release. Sparkline, I guess I'll go to heat map here in a moment. Sparkline is basically the same information, just all in individual lines. And if I come into heat map's kind of nice because now I'm looking at the objects themselves and the current state of the object, not necessarily the performance information. But if I click on one of these, I still open up the Object Explorer so that I can look at any alerts. I can look at the performance charts. Maybe I want to compare the performance information from one performance counter to others that exist there. That kind of opens that up for me. And then the last thing, of course, is back to line chart, which I've already showed you. So the next one is pretty close to what it was before when it comes to alert summary. Alert summary we had in version 8, some of the same details and views here. Data, if I want to select a class or a group, either way, the same kind of flow works, whether you want to select, an individual group, an object, or just classes of objects in there. So if I want to grab my Windows Server role and I want to look at, warning and error, then I can get a listing of the servers that I have and the total number of alerts that are in there. Obviously you can change your resolution state to what you want, whether it just be new or you know, the different resolution states that you have within your SCOM group. Now I can click on these. That'll also open up an Object Explorer, so you can drill in a little bit further and see those alerts and so on and so forth. Alert listing. Now this is a lot like before, but there's one major difference. If I add an alert listing on here and I do nothing else and I click add, that will add the alert listing in here. You'll notice these kind of pop down. You can move and drag and drop and move these out of the way or rearrange it as you see fit. But if I do nothing and configure this to anything else, it automatically shows me, in this case, all alerts, in this case critical, for the last day. And when I say last day, it's anything that was modified. You know, created or modified is really what it comes down to. If I click on one of these, I have an alert panel that pops off to the side, and you can get your information. You can change some of this information a little bit more than you could in version 8, but I can change resolution state, open up a health explorer. You know, it's this side panel that we're kind of dealing with here. You can sort these, so the columns are sortable. Also, if I included my severity, my different severities, then I can turn around and change that too. So you still have the ability to maybe, you know, set this to a class or set this to a group. You know, maybe I want error and warning, or maybe I want my time span to go back a little bit further than just one day as far as when they were last, you know, modified. So you have those choices, and maybe you only want to show the top 100 or top whatever alerts for a particular class or group, especially if you have something that generates a lot of alerts. So you have a little bit more flexibility in that aspect when it comes to the alerts widget itself. Okay, so we're there. What was the next one I was going to do? Oh, service. So services widget. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Services widget is going to show you a listing of your services. That's really what it comes down to. You know, we had this one in V8. It's pretty much the same thing in V10. You can selection of all services. You can select it as in alphanumeric or by health state. That'll depend on, you know, where you see your reds. Now you do have two options here. This defaults to an entity list, but if I want, I can have a heat map instead. You can also choose to have this in, I guess this is a little different, is that now I can choose to maybe take up a little less room, put it in 3 columns versus 2, or maybe just have them all list out in one. It's kind of up to you on how you would like to see this. So if I wanted to take that and line it up there in the corner so that it's taking up as little space as possible, then I can do something like this. The SLA widget, there we go. Data on the SLA widget, you choose your service that you would like to see, and then you can choose whether you want it to, you know, instead of doing a search and trying to figure out which one was the service, the end user, you know, now I can just pick it right away, and you'll pick the component you want. I will say that this is one area that it does help to actually have a title, because when you do select something like end user component, it doesn't necessarily tell you which one it's at. So when I add this one, you know, if I really want to, I can make this take up, you know, that amount of space, as small as possible. All right, so I'm going to save that. And by the way, I said save that, but really it's as you do things within V10, we're automatically saving that data on the back end. So there's kind of this auto save as you're working with it to complete the process. And you will notice that, you know, I've gone past the field of view. I can shrink this up a bit if I want, so that it you know, takes up the same space here as possible. And then now everything will, if you do basically 4 by 6, everything will align on one page. You just have 12 widgets that you can now fill up that area if you absolutely want to. Okay, so that is the majority of those. The last one that I'll actually cover today is going to deal with PowerShell. That one I actually have my own PowerShell one set up. I've shown this one in the past with some of the sneak peeks, but I haven't really gone into a lot of them. I purposely divided this up and dealt with PowerShell on this particular users group versus PowerShell on versus SQL, which we'll do in the next one. Put myself in edit mode. The simplest one is going to be console. Each one of these is going to have kind of the same outlook when you talk about title, refresh, views. You'll notice that I have a whole lot more views here of how we can do things. There is one set of rules, though, is that each of these views has its own expected type of result to be returned. So if you come up here to the help, this will actually tell you exactly what we're looking for. I also do have a document that I shared with those people who were in our beta 2 actually received also, that should gave them ideas of how these things are formulated, how these things are built out, gives them examples. Eventually, we're going to have some of those examples actually built into the product itself. Plus, we do plan to have that all online, so it kind of can give you an idea of how these things need to be. But these are what we're looking for. So if I scroll down the bottom, console is the simplest view. Basically, it's just, hey, return like you normally would any PowerShell. But if I wanted something like the bar chart or a line graph, then I'm looking for a key, I'm looking for an X, and I'm looking for a Y. The key for the X is going to be the date time group. We kind of need it in a certain format. And I'll actually show that here in just a moment. So if I go to my data tab, this is where you can see the PowerShell script itself. Couple things. If you're running this on a management server itself, you do not need the import module operations manager or the connection to the management server itself. That's just not needed. If you're running this on a standalone IIS web server, you will need those, and you'll also need to make sure that the PowerShell, like for what you're connecting to, in this case, Operations Manager, is installed on that computer. So if this is a standalone web server, then I probably need to install the SCOM console in order to make sure those are registered. There are some ways to add those manually. I found a couple blog articles on how to do that for Operations Manager. So it's one of the things I'll probably share out for those people who just want to add in the command lines and not have to worry about installing an Operations Manager. But you'll notice that we use IntelliSense, and we try to color code it so it's easier to read instead of just plain black and white text. Also down here you have a run button, so you can run your script and basically see your results. So as you're doing it, you can run it and see your results. I do recommend that if you're not getting any results, that on the computer that you're trying to, that the operations or that the portal is installed, that you open up PowerShell, try to run it from there. Also realize that permissions are still based off of the app pool user. So I suggest also running the PowerShell as that user to make sure that the user itself has permissions to do what you're after. We're trying to add in some error catching things so you can see the errors directly in here. However, the easiest way to do that is always going to be doing it through PowerShell itself first to see that information. Okay. So I'm going to go through these so you can kind of see how they're formatted, how I go through it, and go from there. I'm going to start with the bar graph one. Bar graph, if I come directly to the data view, this is kind of the way that it's put together. All of them are going to expect some kind of result. In this case, I initialize my result, I go through all this process, and at the very end, I return a result. However, in between there, I've initialized, I've added my new object, and then I've given it certain property values that I need. In this case, a key, an X, and a Y. Now my Y in this case, because I'm really only doing a count, like right now count, it only really needs to be today. It does have to be in a date time group format. So I do have a little bit of a conversion going on to put it into the Unix, the Epoch, the JavaScript format, however you want to call it, so that at least I have it there. It does need that format in order to work. Now, each one of these, I'm basically just doing the same thing over and over and over again for each of the statuses that I'm running through, and then eventually I come through and I'm doing a count on the status of all the computers in this group. In this case, it's the All Windows Computer group. Add those counts together and then finally return the results. So this is how you have this, and I can see that, you know, I have currently 6 healthy computers. I have 1 in error. I have, you know, 1 that's not available, and 2 in warning. So if I want, I can turn those off. I can double click on them and only show the 1. You know, it's kind of the same format that you had on the other ones. For the pie chart, we need slightly different information, pretty close to the same. In this case, I really only need a title and a value. This was part of a copy from another PowerShell widget that I left in there when I was putting all this together. So that's actually, the maximum is not actually needed. That's actually needed for the bullet graph that I'll show here in a moment. But it's the same basic concept, gone through initializing my objects, counting my objects, putting them together, returning the result. Now, bullet graph is this one here. This is where you can basically have a targeted graph. This was actually a feature request from one customer that was dealing mainly in SQL. And in V8, you can only put 1 bullet graph, or in that case, it was called a targeted gauge on a particular widget. Now you actually have the concept of adding multiple bullet graphs all on the same widget, all within the same widget. Not really sure how useful that is when you're talking about doing a count for computers, but there are many other things that you can turn around and say, hey, this is what my current value is, this is what my target is, and this is my maximum. So if I look at the script here, that's really what I'm after, is I'm needing a title, the target itself, what I'm actually at right now, and then what my maximum value is going to be. Now you can also show it up in a grid. What's nice about the grid is now you have the same kind of function where you can do a sort. You can also turn around and export that into a CSV file. Any of the grids in any way will always have an export function. Now, heat map and entity list are going to have the same requirements. If I kind of come down here, you'll see that I basically need an ID, a display name, a class name, whether it's available or not, and then the health status itself. Now keep in mind, you can do this for anything. I'm doing this for a computer object, but nothing says I have to do it for a computer object. You can do anything that you really want to have a health state to. The key there is that you have to kind of follow it under our health states of what we're looking for whether you want to see it in red, yellow, gray, or green. Those are the colors that are in our health state widget. So that's really what we're reusing here. But you can hard code some of this information. So in this case, where it's looking for a class, in my particular case, I didn't actually put a class. I told it to go grab the Windows computer IP address. I didn't need to know it was a Windows computer. I already knew that. That's what I'm grabbing. But I did think that adding an IP address was in there would be nice. I could obviously have created just a blank entry in there if I wanted to, and just leave nothing in there. Or it's up to you. That's the nice thing about PowerShell, is that you can add, remove, replace, and take it from there. Now, the other thing that's really nice about this, because we're reusing parts of the health state widget itself, if you do pull information from SCOM, and the ID is actually the GUID for that particular object, if I click on it, since we have the GUID, we're actually going into the Managed Entity page. That also may be nice and helpful if you turn around and want to see the health state of one object, but when you click on it, you actually want it to go into the computer object to see the health state of it and then everything that's below it. So you can kind of change what you're seeing and how you see it in that aspect, and then still have some of the troubleshooting techniques that exist with the regular health state widget. The single metric is really just asking for a title and a value. There's a difference here in the fact that, I forgot I'm not in edit mode. There's a difference here in the fact that used to be that we had a single metric in version 8, and a widget took up a single metric. Well, now you can actually have multiple single metrics. I can also change this and move my options, and let's say I want this in 2 columns, or 3 or 4, or however I feel like I need to do that. You can change your look to display information as you see fit. And then this last one down here that I'll cover for today, at least as far as dealing with PowerShell, is the no results message. I've kind of felt this was important because with the no results message of everything else, it's kind of basic to understand. Hey, if I don't have any warnings or I don't have any errors, then yeah, I have no results. In PowerShell, obviously, you can create your own test. As long as you return an empty array, then that's what we're going to have, is you have no results. So that allows you to create your own tests internal of your PowerShell, and then write those scripts. And when you're done, create whatever message or have any look. You could add your big green check mark, your stormtroopers with their thumbs up, or however you feel like you want to do, or maybe you just want a company logo in there. I don't know, but hopefully that gives you a lot of ideas on what you can do with PowerShell and play around with this. Now, I'm going to cover a couple things only because I know that they've existed out there, and I've gotten questions from them, not only in beta, but then also in even this morning session when it dealt with PowerShell. Okay, so I said before that the app pool user is the one that we're actually running the permissions under. This morning, I was specifically asked about adding information from AD, and groups and members and last logons and things of that nature. And all that's great, but the problem there, in order to do it, chances are I probably have to make my app pool user a domain admin in order to gain access to some of that stuff. Probably not something you want to do. However, one of the things that one group happened to do is they have a script that's running locally on the computer, and it has the permissions that it needs to, gathers that information, dumps that into a text file, and then we're simply reading the text file and then formatting it the way that they need it. So it is a way for you to actually go do that and gather the information and kind of get around that permissions problem. It does mean you're running a separate process on the server or on another server that the PowerShell widget can gain access to. If you run it as if you're formatting in an HTML, then obviously you can show that in our HTML widget or in our web page widget. There's some gotchas on that one that someone on this call actually already knows. There is one more thing that I'll tell you that's coming. It's not going to be in the release of version 10, but it will show up probably about 10.1. At least that's where I'm hoping it shows up anyway, is one of the other formats or one of the other views that we're going to allow is an HTML widget or HTML output. So you can run PowerShell and then format it in HTML and then have it basically shown however you want. So now the control is really in your hands. If you're good at that part and can code it out right, then you can have it display pretty much however you need. So those are questions that I've gotten before. I figured I'd go ahead and start that and talk about those sections. You can see as these things refresh, it's just a quick circle that kind of goes around to let you know when it's refreshed. You can also see the time that it's last refreshed, because the time down here will not necessarily always be the time. That's right now because of the change. The time down here is the time the page was loaded. But these are at least will tell you the time that each one of those will have refreshed themselves. On that note, a recap. Hopefully I've gone through quite a lot, at least for this part one. It probably should have been renamed part one. We covered health state, performance, alerts, services, SLAs, PowerShell. That's quite a lot to actually cover. Just to let you know, July, the next round, we'll try to cover, the other widgets that are there, like the affected services, custom dashboards where you can add some of your other dashboards created in the authoring console in there. HTML web page widgets, those can actually be kind of interesting based on some of the things that we got from our beta customers. And of course, I'll end that with SQL. I figured PowerShell and SQL pretty big topics as it is. And because it now extends the flexibility of what you can show and how you can show it within Live Maps. So I did kind of split those up.
And as Chris mentioned, if anybody signed up for beta but hasn't had a chance to download it yet and wants to, just reach out to him at support@savision.com or myself, and we can help you out with that. Lon and I will be reaching out in a couple of weeks just to collect any feedback you haven't already shared, so we can make Live Maps as good as we can for you. Yep.
So on that, next users group that we're going to have will be July 26th. The invites will go out probably the week prior, like they have been. We're going to cover summary dashboards again, but this will be part 2, just to finish out the widgets that are there and give you the updated information. Of course, I'll have an updated build by then, or I may have the release build by then. Hopefully, that's where I'm really crossing my fingers and bouncing up and down for. So we are getting close. There's just a few issues we're trying to resolve to make this as smooth as possible for everyone, and give them the flexibility, but hopefully don't take them backwards at all in any spot. So. With that, I want to thank you for joining. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, any other information you'd like to know, please feel free to email support@savision.com. I'll respond. We can get your questions and answers done there. And other than that, hey, everyone, have a good day.